Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Promises and Pitfalls, Taking Stock of Online Education. I'm Will Friedman, the president of Public Agenda. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that helps communities in the nation make progress on divisive and complex issues. Our work involves innovative public opinion research, public engagement, and facilitating dialogue and collaboration among diverse stakeholders. I'm joined by my colleague, Caroline Hagel-Skamp, Public Agenda's Director of Research, and Ann Kirshner, the Dean of Macaulay Honors College in New York, a pioneer in online education and a member of Public Agenda's board. Ann and Caroline will be speaking today about the changing landscape of online learning in higher education, including its promises and pitfalls. We'll then turn to new public opinion research on the views of employers and of community college students toward online education. Our communications assistant, Megan, is sharing the URL for that research in your chat box now, and if you'd like to check it out after the webinar, you can go there. We also include that link in a follow-up email. That research and this webinar was generously funded by the Kresge Foundation, so we appreciate that. Before we begin, let me just situate you with our webinar system. If you've connected to audio over your computer and are having difficulty with sound, you can also connect via telephone by following the instructions on the slide in front of you, and that can work better sometimes. To the right of your screen, you'll see a control panel that you can hide or display by clicking on the arrow. Everyone is muted for the webinar today, so we won't be able to hear anything on your end. But we will have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, and you can participate in that by typing any questions you have throughout the presentation in the chat box on your screen to the right. Your question will be seen only by the presenters and not by the broader audience. So you can just, any questions you have along the way, just put them in the chat box and we'll try to get to them. If we don't get a chance to answer your questions in the course of the webinar, we'll follow up via email. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ann Kirshner to set the context for us and review a bit about the past, present, and future of online education.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, too, to the Kresge Foundation for sponsoring this research. I'm going to talk about where we are in the evolution of online learning generally, and then I think we will talk about where we might be headed. And of course, this is just my crystal ball, although I will try and make that crystal ball relate to at least some of the data that we have about online learning. So if you look at any given moment in history, a snapshot is very likely to be confusing. For instance, we've heard, we've thought, we've read so much about MOOCs, including this month's article about Sebastian Thrun. And so you might draw the conclusion, if you look just at the news in the last couple of weeks, that MOOCs are dead. Is this really the case? You'd be right if you said, no, this isn't really the case, because I don't think it really is the case. If you take a step back and look not at just a single moment, but at long-term trends, you can see that online learning is here to stay. MOOCs actually were not the most important four-letter word in higher ed in 2013. Debt was. This was really the year, looking back over the last 12 months, that the public consciousness really awoke to a crisis in the perceived value of higher education. And at the same time, they awoke to that other four-letter word, MOOCs, which really had, I think, something in the way of romance for media reporters. Oh my God, you could get something for nothing, a real shortcut to educating the masses with high-quality learning. I always think about that moment in the movie The Matrix when Tiffany decides she needs to learn how to ride a helicopter, and they zap her in the head, and all of a sudden all the documentation for working a helicopter arrives. Well, you know, I think people sort of thought that's what was coming with MOOCs, and it's never that easy. Shortcuts are never that available. And no surprise, the pendulum is now swinging back the other way. Thrun giveth and Thrun taketh away. First, MOOCs were the answers to all of our problems, and now they're disaster. And of course, as with any pendulum swing, there really is more truth right in the middle. So when you look at the long-term trends, they are clear. A dozen years ago, there were fewer than 10% of students who had enrolled in online courses. In fall 2011, it was almost a third of all students in degree-granting post-secondary institutions who were taking at least one online course. And it's important to note that most of those were taken by students at their home institution. So those are presumably students who were finding something in their online course that they couldn't find in a face-to-face instructor-led course. There's about 3 million students who are earning complete degrees online. I think when you look at professional certification, those trends are even clearer. Now, speaking as a doctor's wife, in the old days, and I've been married for a long time, my husband would go to continuing medical education events in nice locations. Yes, sometimes on beaches, more often places like Philadelphia or, or Chicago. But all of that really has gone away. It's all moved online, and it's not only continuing medical education. The same thing has happened in legal education, in professional certification in areas like real estate, financial services. And it's interesting, people are really getting comfortable with online learning in the workplace. This is quite similar to what happened in the beginnings of the PC revolution. It didn't start at home, it started at the office with people using things like VisiCalc at work, and then eventually found reasons why they had to have PCs at home. So the migration, the comfort level of online learning going from professional certification to home use and personal use is quite consistent with that. Now, professional educators get the value of this, at least among senior administrators in higher education. In 2012, about 77% of chief academic officers rated learning outcomes in online education as the same or superior to those in face-to-face. That's up from about 57% in 2003 rather. But rank and file faculty, when you look at their attitudes, they are far more skeptical, especially, as you would imagine, amongst those who have never taught online. Only 15% of faculty who have not taught an online course say that they can get learning outcomes that are at least equivalent to in-person courses. So faculty resistance remains strong. We can argue why they're so resistant. We can say that it's concerns about pedagogy, or at the other end of the scale, we can say that this is more personal concern about professional obsolescence. But whichever it is, the fact of the matter is that faculty are quite resistant. Students get it. Students, about 65% of current or online program graduates say that their program was a worthwhile financial investment. About 31% say it was somewhat worthwhile, and only 4% said it was not worth it. A very important constituency is the attitude of employers. And we'll talk about employers in a minute when we turn to the new public agenda survey, which shows that they're still somewhat on the sidelines. They're waiting for more experience with students who have learned online. And I think that's really the audience that we're going to be talking about most today. Let me end these introductory remarks with some predictions about where things are headed. So the trend is clear, maybe not quite a hockey stick, but a clear upward trend. Online learning is here to stay. It's only going to get better, more prevalent, and more an accepted part of the education landscape. So traditional institutions ignore online learning at their peril. And this isn't simply a matter of managing tuition costs. So it's not just that online learning can be cheaper. In some ways, in some contexts, online learning can be better. How? Well, there are some irrefutable advantages. It's convenient. You can learn in your jammies 24/7 for working adults who are trying to balance going to school with keeping their families afloat. Online learning is convenient, and certainly when you look at the number of students who take online courses when they could go to the classroom, that is the primary motivation for them. They need to fit it into their schedule, and so they take a course online. It also offers the promise of a huge catalog of courses. Maybe they don't teach advanced astrophysics at your campus, or maybe there's an obscure dialect that you need to learn that isn't taught at your school, and that's really where online learning can offer you a vast library of courses. Part of that is also access to the people who are the giants in the field. And I've seen applications from students for prestigious fellowships who actually list some MOOCs that they've taken with some of these people right on their applications to demonstrate that they are very at the cutting edge of their field. It also helps to connect you to a global audience. I have a colleague at Macaulay who took a MOOC on immigration reform, which is an area she's very interested in. What she found so extraordinary was that her fellow classmates were not just people who were taking the course in New York City, where she was, but an international student audience. So that was very exciting. Online learning also has tremendous appeal for different learning styles. Maybe you're not the one who always had your hand up in the class. Maybe you're a little shyer. Online learning can be helpful there as well. And for students who grew up with the internet, interactivity is practical and fun. Maybe you need that video module on calculus 10 times. That's what the Sol Khan lesson has been, that sometimes the repetition can be very important. So I don't believe that online learning is going to push traditional classrooms aside any more than, let's say, HBO replaced going to the movies. But HBO certainly did have an enormous effect on how we view movies. Market share certainly shifts, and that's what we're going to see here long term. Where are the danger signs? Danger, Will Robinson. Where should we be worried? Is online learning for everyone? Look at this poor woman, picture of this poor woman. She looks so sad. Well, online learning is probably not for everyone. It is most successful for highly motivated learners. And this is somewhat paradoxical. It means that if you were already the beneficiary of a quality foundation, you were already a good learner, a good K-12 education, you're going to be better equipped to take advantage of online learning. And it doesn't work equally for all subjects. My field, once upon a time, was English literature, and it's clear that translating the humanities into these new formats will be more challenging, not impossible, but more challenging than in some of the STEM fields. And there's the important question of what the long-term effect on the professoriate will be. We do have a remarkable system of higher education in the United States. So it behooves us to be careful to improve but not destroy the quality and the traditions that have served us so very well. But let's not be complacent. China, India, other countries are investing mightily in higher education. So we don't want to rest on our laurels. We don't want to see this system decline. We want to stay at the top and maybe even improve the quality that we offer to our students. And now I'm going to turn this over to Carolyn.
Thank you very much, Anne. First of all, I need to apologize for my hoarse voice. I'm trying to get over a cold. I just hope that the audience can somewhat follow me. I will now present recent public agenda research on employers and community college students' views and experiences with online courses and degrees. And this research was first published in September of this year as a public agenda taking stock report with the title Not Yet Sold. I encourage the audience to download the brief from our website for more detail than what I can present here. And I think Megan is going to give you the link to the website one more time. Why did we do this research? Well, as Anne laid out, online education is rapidly evolving in higher education. And as people are more exposed to online offers, which are also becoming increasingly diverse, opinions are likely to change and develop quickly as well. With this research, we sought to take stock of two important stakeholder groups' views and experiences with online education at a specific point in time, and that's employers and community college students. Why employers? Well, employers' views, of course, are important as they may influence how they evaluate the quality of job applicants who earned their degrees online. Of course, it's also true that it may not be apparent to an employer right away whether or not a degree was earned online or how much of it was earned online, but it is likely that employers who really care about this information will ask applicants about it or try to find out some other way. Why community college students? Well, given the diversity of online education offers, it seems like we need to look at more like smaller homogeneous groups of students to evaluate their experiences with it, rather than doing a broad survey of any student who's ever taken any kind of online class. Also, community college students are serving nearly half of the nation's undergraduate population, and they're increasingly experimenting with online courses and programs to accommodate both the large numbers of students that they are serving, as well as all the students who are working part-time, who are combining school with work and family demands. And even though some previous studies suggest that online education can result in equal or even better learning outcomes for students compared to classroom instruction, research with community college students specifically has found that those who are already struggling academically are more likely to drop out of online classes than classes taught face-to-face. With the findings that I'm about to present, we are hoping to contribute to valuable information to an ongoing national conversation on how online education needs to evolve to best serve students and future job applicants. All right, so we want to start with the employers. Last spring, we conducted a regionally representative survey, telephone survey, with 656 HR professionals from four metropolitan regions in the United States, Detroit, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and the El Paso, Las Cruces region. Respondents qualified if they said that making hiring decisions was an important part of their job, and they had that they would at least sometimes hire for positions that require a post-secondary credential. Here are just a couple of interesting facts about these employers. We found that about 1 in 4, 23%, have taken an online class themselves, and the vast majority say that their organizations or their companies support online professional development for their employees with tuition support. That's among all the companies that give tuition support at all to employees. So now we're coming to the substantive findings of our survey with employers. So first of all, employers do see a positive side of online education. Most employers believe that there's a niche for this kind of education, especially for older students. So we have here on the right-hand side, you see 80% agree that older students can get a valuable college credential online. And at least 50% say the same is true for younger first-time college students, although that's clearly a lot fewer than the 80% who see it as something valuable for older students. We also found that many employers feel that online courses require more discipline from students compared with in-person instruction. And some of this, just from kind of a focus group experience, might be that employers don't typically have, very few took their own degrees completely online. And just the prospect of getting yourself through college all online is kind of daunting to some of them from a discipline or from a self-motivation perspective. That's what we heard in the focus groups, at least. At the same time, many employers remain skeptical of the quality of online programs compared to traditional programs. And here the pie chart on the left shows that employers are split on whether students learn less in online-only programs than traditional programs, or whether they learn about the same. Virtually no one feels that students may actually be learning more online. And then on the right-hand side, we see that employers are equally split, whether they feel online-only programs are easier to pass than traditional programs or about the same. And again, very few feel they may actually be harder to pass, even though there are many employers who feel that they require more discipline. And when it comes down to it, we found that employers still remain somewhat cautious or conservative. They're far more likely to prefer a job candidate who has a degree from an average school that was completed entirely in the classroom than someone who has a degree from a top school that was completed entirely online. And also, here you can see that when you give employers the option, the vast majority will agree that hybrid programs, so programs that combine online with in-classroom instruction, give students a better education than online-only programs. And now I'm going to turn to what we heard from community college students. So we also, at the same time, we ran a relatively small 215 and survey with community college students. This data was collected through random digit dialing telephone and online, and it is weighted to be representative of the community college student population. Just to start with, we learned from the survey that nearly all of the community college students say that they are working towards a credential. Only 6% said that they are only taking classes but not looking to graduate with a degree or certificate from their current school. And then if we go into the substantive findings, the survey with community college students and employers was parallel, so there's a lot of very similar questions. So here we find that even more so than employers, community college students, whether or not they had taken an online class, feel this kind of learning requires more discipline from students than in-classroom instruction. Sorry. And then similarly to employers, community college students are split on whether students learn less or just the same through online versus in-classroom instruction. Again, virtually no student feels they may perhaps be learning more online. Students and employers' views diverge on the question as to whether online classes may be harder or easier to pass than those taught in the classroom. As opposed to employers, many students feel these courses are harder to pass, or about the same. The difference here may be that students associate harder to pass with something that requires more discipline, while employers may primarily think of the substance of a course or the quality of the instruction when they evaluate whether the class is harder or easier to pass. And finally, we find that just about half of community college students take one or more classes online, and among those who do take classes online, a substantial number, here 41%, say they wish they could take fewer classes online. This, we believe, is a sign that these community college students really are not yet sold on online education, at least in the way that they are experiencing it in their colleges right now. As I said in the beginning, we see these findings very much as a snapshot in time. Online education is quickly developing and diversifying. It will be important to see if and how employers' views are going to change as they encounter more applicants with online degrees, and also as their employees seek more professional development online. And employers' lingering skepticism towards online ed, and then again their apparent trust in the value of face-to-face instruction, may also suggest that there's significantly more room for better communications and perhaps collaboration between employers and higher ed on the development of online curricula. The results of our student survey suggest that as online education develops, we need to make sure that it becomes an increasingly effective option for those who can most benefit from it, but without becoming more and more of a burden for those who prefer in-classroom instruction. And of course, there are many more stakeholders whose views we need to take into consideration and that are very valuable to track over time, and faculty, of course, are one of such stakeholders. I will now open it up to the Q&A part of the webinar. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box, and we'll go through them and pick some out. And there are actually a few here. Let me see. Okay, I think this is a question for Anne. You note some faculty skepticism about whether they can achieve comparable outlines in online courses. How are outcomes being measured? Given the intensity of debates in K-12 over standardized testing, are you confident that the right outcomes are being measured in accurate ways in higher education?
That's an interesting question that is a heated one in higher education circles, having nothing to do with online education. There's definitely a move in K-12 towards clearer assessment and definition of learning outcomes, and it has been resisted mightily by traditional institutions, which see that as the prerogative of faculty, not legislators. The same faculty sometimes would like to hold online learning to a higher standard and ask, what is it really you do learn from an online course? And I've had some heated conversations with faculty, because if we ask the same question of them about their classroom instruction, they wouldn't like to answer that question at all. So I think, the reality is that students and their families are paying tuition, and it's an absolutely fair question to ask whether learning outcomes are effective, whether the course is taught in a large lecture, in a small classroom, or online. But I think we are still in the very early stages of implementing those sorts of metrics in higher education.
Okay, and here's a quick question. Are these variations in employer opinions, but do they vary by industry? That's a question we would love to know more about. We have about half of the employers that we surveyed come from the broad category of service industries, and everybody else is kind of scattered around all sorts of other industries that kind of don't allow any more for comparison. And we don't know enough about the detailed kind of, don't know enough about these employers to break it down into more homogeneous categories. So that's been, we haven't been able to do that kind of analysis yet. But it's definitely a very important one, and not just by whether they vary by industry, but also for the kind of positions they are hiring for, more junior positions or senior positions and things like that. There's another question on the employer survey. Did you query the HR folks about their degree, meaning are those who took online courses more receptive to applicants who took online courses? Yes, we did. So we had 23% who took a course online. That's about 150 in the sample, which is not huge, and they do tend to be more receptive. But it's a small group, so the differences were either not significant or just kind of just barely significant. But generally speaking, there was a trend for those who had experience to be a little bit more favorable towards applicants with online courses. Here's another one for Anne. Do you agree with the Inside Higher Ed recent article arguing that MOOCs have degraded the reputation of online education?
I haven't seen the article, but I would definitely disagree with the premise. I think the biggest hurdle to online education is Okay, we have a little. Okay, I have a talking iPad in the background. I think that the biggest question with online education, the biggest concern, is that people don't understand it. They don't understand what it's good for and whether it's effective and whether it's reputable. MOOCs did a tremendous amount to reach the general populace with a notion that you can learn in different ways, and that some of those ways can be even more effective for learners than traditional ways. So I think we have a lot to thank the MOOC revolution, the MOOC explosion to discover that people know a lot more about online education than they did before. So I don't believe that they, in the long term, will have done us any harm. I think they helped to popularize the notion.
And here's another one for the employer survey. Employers are skeptical of online programs, yet feel that online courses demand more discipline. How do you explain that apparent contradiction? Yeah, I think it's what I said. Kind of comes out of my experience in focus groups, that it's a little bit of a lack of personal experience, and this is an age group between like roughly 40 and 55 who have gone, who all have basically bachelor degrees or more, and who've taken them mostly in virtually all in traditional ways. So I think it's more of a kind of an assumption that it's really hard to get yourself motivated to do things online, and there's actually something of employers are quite impressed with applicants who the stereotypical applicant of a 50-year-old mother with 3 kids working full-time, got her master's degree online, and is now looking for a career change. That kind of person, at least in focus groups, is very impressive to employers, for sure. And then we have here another one. What are some of the proven best practices for online teaching in terms of pedagogy? What methods beyond lecture engage the learners? I'm going to hand this over to Anne.
We already saw in the research that motivation is key. It's harder to be an online learner, at least until you get used to it. And one of the most challenging areas for online education has been creating some sort of a social context that gives learners support, the notion of a peer group, the same sort of feeling that you have when you walk into a classroom of students you may know. That's been achieved in various ways. I think the idea of breaking a class down into relatively small groups of 20 or less is extremely important. We're probably still in inning 1 of what kinds of technologies will make that group come together. I took a MOOC a couple of months ago and was sad to see that threaded message boards really haven't improved much in the last 15 or 20 years. We have learned a lot about use of video in online learning. Keep them short. I think the research shows that something like 5 minutes is about max for a video module. And the research also shows that when you break up video with quizzes or other kinds of interactivity, it definitely helps to focus the mind. One other best practice that is important is some sense of responsiveness. And again, this is like what happens in the classroom. When you ask a question, does the instructor respond? In a poorly run face-to-face class, you'll have the sense that you're in it alone, that the instructor isn't responding to you, and that everyone in the class is somewhat at sea. In a well-run class, whether it's online or in the face-to-face classroom, you have a sense that you're on a learning journey together, and you're all there to support each other, students supporting students as well as instructor supporting students. So a lot of the best practices are similar. Of course, with online, it's the technology piece that we're still learning about, but I think that we're getting there, and as broadband becomes more widely available, we've got better bandwidth to watch better video. I think we are getting a lot more exciting in the kinds of things that we can show students.
Okay, and here we have another one. Did you find anything specifically about community college students' views towards the nature of interaction between instructor and student in the online context, and how that might impact learning? Good question, and I think it's a little bit more closely related to what Anne was just discussing, that the nature of the interaction is still important, even though they are in different places. We didn't ask about that in our survey, so I can't really speak to any. We don't have any survey results on it, but it's definitely, again, something we do here in focus groups, that people, even though they are online, they do sometimes appreciate if the class size is still small, because they feel that somebody is responding when they ask a question. So I think I agree with, I can just agree with Anne that interaction, even though it's not face-to-face, is still really, really important. And I think this kind of takes us to the end of this webinar. I have one more thing I want to attract your attention to. We're coming out with a report on for-profit higher education and research with, again, employers on their views on higher for-profit colleges and for-profit students. This is the cover page of the forthcoming report. We are considering changing the title of the cover still. But we really hope that you find that you may find it interesting to see that report as well. And if you'd like to be on a mailing list for that report, Megan will also contact you after the webinar, or you can put in something in the chat box. So I think this is it. Thank you all so much for attending. If you have any further questions, please contact us. A recording of this webinar will be available on our website shortly. And I wish you all a happy holidays, and thanks again.